Welcome to the What Now podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Powers. Follow along as I figure out how to go from feeling lost and at a crossroads in my life to hopefully, eventually, being found. If you have ever felt like you needed a change or pivoting from your current experience is necessary, but you just don't know how, join me. Wanderers are always welcome. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to What Now, a podcast for the lost and found. This is your host, Amanda. I am so excited today. Our guest is a dear friend of mine who I met many, many moons ago, but had the pleasure of working with back when we were in the restaurant industry together. And she is now a soon-to-be mom of two, living in Panama, running her own businesses, and had multiple evolutions through different career paths, teaching English, being a realtor, running a marketing consulting business, and now has moved on to bigger and better things and living a fully grassroots life all on her own with her partner. And I'm so excited to bring her on today. We're going to talk about how to live your most authentic life and pursue your own version of happiness. So everybody, please welcome Kati Cutshall.
Yay. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, thank you. That's the part I improv still a little bit. Like I'm like trying to think of what's the most important thing I want to say about each guest and what makes me excited to talk to them. And then I feel like that's exactly what I should say. But I'm so excited to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I am every day is, no matter where you are, every day is a challenge. And today my challenge is my phone popping up and saying low device storage. And I hope that doesn't interfere with everything. But no, we're feeling good. We're like the best weather ever here.
I know, it looks beautiful.
Yeah. It's a big relief. Big relief after some of the challenges we've been through.
Right. Yeah. No, and we'll definitely get into that. Well, Kati, for my listeners who may have not had the pleasure of getting to know you yet or seeing your businesses online, do you mind just giving us a brief rundown of who you are and what you're working on these days and how you are influencing various industries?
Yeah. I'm Kati. I am Prism Seed, and I guess the best way to start that is I named myself Prism Seed because I don't really have one focus. I see myself and I see what I want to offer the world as being very multifaceted. And at the same time, very creative. So my background is somewhat in education, global affairs. I've lived in multiple countries. I've worked with like conflict resolution in the Middle East, and which led me to education, which led me to realizing I couldn't realistically have the impact that I wanted to in the traditional way. And so I went on a long journey to figure out like what am I here for? And I'm not saying that journey is over, but I feel like I've just figured out a method for going on that journey. Yeah. And in my current iteration, while we live abroad again, we've been in Panama for 2 years, so we live the tropics life. And I currently, in my current situation, I am mostly hoping to inspire people, moms, to pursue health in the way that makes sense for them. And for me, right now, that's doing a whole lot of meal planning, cooking pretty much 100% from scratch, figuring out ways as a mom of a toddler, and I'm also halfway through a second pregnancy, to stay active without a gym. We live really remotely here. Right, and yeah. So how am I staying active? How am I still maintaining some of my muscle mass? And also being provider. And so I have some digital products in the works that are around meal planning, around specifically how I it's worked for us to just to nourish ourselves in a way that is really challenging, not only in Panama, not only in Central America, but in the US, it's becoming more and more challenging. For me, that looks like plant-based, and that's not for everyone. And I like to be a living testimony that you can absolutely have healthy pregnancies and raise healthy children, and also do it all outside the system. And so that's sort of what I want to represent in this moment. Because I've done my pregnancies. I've given birth completely without assistance. I don't see doctors.
Right.
They're not invited into my space. And that's the point I am with my accountability today. So I guess in the work, I still do marketing. I still offer marketing consulting. I still do consultations as well as content creation, sort of helping people develop their brand voice, get closer to who they are and how they want to portray themselves and communicate what makes them special and how they can help the world. And in my own time, this is what I want to inspire. I want to help people get closer to who they are and experience the peace that sort of arrives with that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm so glad that you've touched on all kinds of things and kind of shown that your trajectory doesn't have to be exactly linear, right? Like you can come back and reiterate yourself, and you can build upon things that you learned in your past, and you don't need to stay in just one thing. You know, if it doesn't fit you anymore, it's completely okay. If you learn new things, you should evolve with that too. And you can change your own opinion, and you can change your plans. You don't have to follow what other people are following just because that's the way it's, what is it? People are like, well, this is the way we've always done it. Like, why would you change it? Yeah, exactly. So how did your upbringing influence your career? Like, is your family also entrepreneurs, or did you always know you wanted to be your own boss or business owner? You know, what kind of helped you come to that decision?
Not at all. I was extremely resistant to even the idea of being in business for myself, like taking that responsibility of being everything from marketing to sales to conversion to like actually taking someone through whatever service or product you offer, and then maintaining relationships. Like it was all very like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. Just give me one thing to do. I am a projector in human design. I like to help people develop their own process, develop their own whatever it is, really. I'm a systems person. So I really thrived in school, in following rules, in like, oh, this is the goal. Okay, I can do this to get to that goal. And so when I started real estate, I was extremely out of water as a fish. I was like,
Oh no.
I was like, oh, I have to do everything. Wait, what? And I don't like hearing. I'm a big fear of rejection. I don't, cold calls are like the last thing that I ever want to do. I don't, especially as a projector, we thrive when we're invited into things. And so the idea of showing it up at someone's door unexpected, or knocking or calling, and they have no idea who I am, I don't feel comfortable, and I don't thrive in insisting and convincing people. And so the way I went around that was actually, that's why I got into marketing and social media specifically, because I could create. I was always trying to create myself the way I thought I should be, the way I thought real estate agents had to be this type of confidence and dress this particular way and talk about these particular things and only be focused on business. And it was just so inauthentic, and I couldn't follow through with it. And so what worked really well for me was just dropping all of that, dropping the facade, going out in my harem pants, like my hippie braids, and just talking about what was interesting to me. And I have a lot to talk about. I love connecting with people. Like I said, I've lived in the Middle East. I have like lots of different various cultural connections. Um, and really, I just want to find some kind of commonality with people and let them feel safe. Just let them feel comfortable. So, I never put myself out as you have to be this kind of plant-based or vegan. I don't like labels because labels create distance and separation. And instead, I just said, this is what I do. This is what makes me happy. This is what I love. And it attracted people just based on that. And did everybody want to buy a house? No, no. But a lot of people have become really helpful allies in whether it was help finding places to travel to, um, or business partners for the future, or connections for different clients. It was just when I became more me, everything flowed easier. Yeah, I'm gonna stop right there.
No, that's fine. No,
Okay.
I'm practicing not interrupting people when they're finishing their answers. So
Bravo.
yeah, I was gonna let you say however much you'd like to say. No, I love that. Like, as you were talking, I started to think about, people always say, like, at least for the modern day women's movement always talks about, leaning in. And it sounds like you, not necessarily that we're trying to get into femininity right now, but just that you leaned into who you are, and doing that resonated with so many other people you may have not have ever met otherwise. And that helped you build your network. And that's one of the great things, the pros about social media, right? That you can interact with people all over the world, and you can build those connections, and you can share experiences that, help improve each other's lives, even if you never meet ever in person. So that's really great that you got to share that, and it helped you appreciate who you are, right? Like, so many people live their lives hating themselves, or just not realizing that, like, I'm doing this thing, or I'm following this label because I was told that that's the label I should have or something. And you don't have to. You don't have to claim it just because somebody else wants to put it on you. So I think that that's really important that you found a way to say that in your own words to others. Well, let's see. On your path to becoming an entrepreneur, you did talk a few times on your socials about living the most authentic life possible. And telling your story authentically, sharing your story with people, and that's the best way to, I guess, market yourself in general. If you're building your own self brand, if that's the way to go about it, what exactly does tell your story mean, and how you implemented that tell your story mentality into your own business and personal life?
Yeah. So what does it mean? It means telling. So from a marketing perspective, you always have a goal in mind, whether it's just more followers or clicks on your website, subscriptions, signups for a course. And your story is always going to, no, your story will never change, but how you present it is going to shift based on what you're trying to achieve. And just in terms of building a personal brand, like some people approach social media just sort of as a landing page, like just in case I get Googled. You don't want to have a blank, stagnant, boring presence. It doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to be posting 3 times a day. And giving so much detail that you like, it's all about your comfort, because as soon as you become uncomfortable, that's no longer your authentic story. Because that resistance, whether you realize it or not, whether your audience realizes it or not, they're going to feel it, and they're going to have their own resistance. And that could look like a lot of things. That could look like just scroll past, or, block in certain situations. I know there's certain accounts that I see and I'm just like, I never want to see or feel that energy again. Like, just don't show me that, because that then tells the algorithm, like, don't put those people in front of me. It's how the algorithm is set to work. So telling your story, essentially, for a marketing purpose, essentially is finding the really crucial elements that resonate from your story, that resonate with your ideal client or your ideal audience. And for me, when I sold a course that was about how to use social media, specifically Instagram and Facebook, I was saying, well, here's where I was and here's where I was unhappy. And I tried to put it in the voice of my ideal prospects. I felt pressured to produce content. I felt I had to fit into a mold. I felt I had to do so much more than I had time for. I was overwhelmed, like all of these things which were true about me and my story. Then I experienced this transformation. And for me, it was, then I tried authenticity, and I started with a gratitude challenge to myself. No one gave it to me. I just said, I want to do 100 days of gratitude because I need to reconnect with what gratitude is. It's something I really struggle with personally, and I knew that. And so showing that type of vulnerability is always, it will always resonate with someone, because someone has always felt lost or uncertain, or like they didn't have enough to be grateful for. Like there's just too much overwhelm, there's too much challenge. Mm-hmm. And when someone sees that, that at least creates that first bridge of connection. And whether they follow or not, it gives you that opportunity to have something real with a person. And the next step from telling that part of your story, you have your pain point, you have a transformation, experience that transformation, and then you want to hardcore hammer in on the results. So that part of the story could look like as simple as, I feel liberated. I no longer look in the mirror and want to spiral down the sink because I hate what I'm looking at. And it wasn't so much for me the physical aspects of what I looked like. I have my own personal problems with how I look, and like everyone has that perception of like, right, I wish this was something.
Yeah.
But it was more, I couldn't even put my finger on it. I would just look in the mirror and cry, and I knew something was off. I knew that I wasn't me, but I didn't have the words to explain it that way. And so the transformation for me in that sense was, I was happy to see what I saw, and I wanted to feel the gratitude because I didn't feel guilty for having things. I didn't feel like I didn't deserve it anymore. And that kind of feeling is something that will really resonate with an audience. Now, it doesn't have to be this personal transformation. If you're selling rainbow backpacks, it could be like, I used to see my child go to school and she looked so bummed out because all the kids at school had really fun, colorful things, and we could only afford, if price point is one of your marketing points, we could only afford the used, plain, drab, whatever. And then the look on her face when I presented her with this affordable, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, like comparable item. And she skipped to the bus, and, there's your transformation. That you want to generate emotion. And the easiest way to generate authentic emotion is by telling where you were and what you were feeling. And so that's what I did. And that's what I always try to do, because even if I only get 100 views on a reel or a few likes, it's like, I know the people that were there, they actually connected with it. And I sort of approach things as like, I just want to reach that one person that's going to be impacted today, that I could inspire or give some kind of encouragement or, help their business take off.
I love that. I'm so glad that that's the way that you found, how to integrate that in both places, your businesses and your personal life. How has that gone for you? Because I know you do content creation full time. I don't. I mean, I do sort of. Like I work in marketing, but I do it for other people. And then all of the content creation that I do for the podcast, I'm doing on my own when I have the time. And I personally have not dove too deep into much of the analytics yet, just because I'm still trying to learn what they actually mean and how I can apply them to something else in the future. But how have you balanced that? Because I know I've heard some content creators talk about like it's so hard that you spend so much time trying to make something that you think is going to resonate with people, and then it totally bombs. And then other times you make a reel that you're like, well, you know, I'm only half-assing it today, but that ends up being the one that like goes viral and people love it and they comment everywhere. Like how do you balance those experiences? And like, have you had situations like that? Or like, do you don't care anymore and you go, you know what, this is how I feel. This is what's on my heart. This is what I'm posting. And then you kind of like set it and forget it. Like, I don't know. How do you deal with the feedback and like what have you kind of learned from that through your process as a content creator?
So the first thing is definitely it's mindset. But the first aspect of the mindset when it comes to marketing for me, especially on socials, is that socials is 100% fluid. Like it will not be the same today as it was yesterday. Everyone says like you have to create a system and show up at exactly the same time. And there is some truth to that. Like you want to have your audience aware of what your schedule is, what they can expect. But it's not to the point where I have to do this all the time. It is very much for me, sort of how you just described, like this is where I'm coming from today, especially as a personal brand. Now that doesn't necessarily work for corporate marketing. I'm all about personal brands. In fact, most of the content that I create is not for myself either. It's for other realtors that I consult with or photographers, or I mean, I guess it's for myself, but I have other platforms that I use for very different purposes. That isn't about me.
Right.
That's about a different topic that I just happen to be the face of. And I have definitely had those situations where I'm like, well, I don't have time today, so I'm just going to slap on some kind of quote that I found that resonated with me today. I'm going to put it over a 7-second clip of me putting my dishes away and just having like, oh, okay, 10,000 views. Like, all right, why? Like, why is it that?
What about that? Did that? Yeah.
But when you're making content, it really is about quantity. Like you don't want to put out crap, but it's not for me, it's not just once in a while for best results, super quality, because you need to feed the algorithm. It's there because it wants to keep people on the platform so that it can sell ads. And if you're only showing up once a week, you're only giving the algorithm, you're only giving Meta what it wants once a week. So how can you play it in your favor? And that's using B-roll, using just the clips of you doing random stuff. I find it works better when you're showing your face. Like for me, it's not the best when it's just my feet walking or something. Unless it really is specific to the message that you're giving. Like if I'm talking about grounding and how that energetically shifts your mentality, something like that. But it's produced in that quantity so that then you can go back and observe. And so I frequently, at least once a week, I'm going back and I'm seeing, all right, so I put on this particular account 14 pieces of content that are permanent, that are not like stories disappearing.
Sure.
And what worked well. And I know that I post one midday and one like early evening. And so I can see like what's working well at what time, when should I be showing up? It helps me adjust my timing, because you got to think about, when is your audience showing up? Are they showing up because they're busy moms and it's only after the kids go to bed? Is it nap time in the middle of the day? Are they busy professionals? So they might be scrolling social before 7 a.m. And where is your content showing up? Because they might not see it till the next day. And by then you've lost your trigger in the algorithm. I definitely feel that twinge of like, this was really important to me, and why didn't anybody else think it was as important as I did? That's a constant thing, unless you're just one of those people that really authentically doesn't give a crap what anybody else thinks. I still do. Like I still want to have impact, regardless of if it's just that one person. But it's being willing to say like, hey, you know what? Maybe for whatever reason it wasn't today. Like I reused a piece of content that I posted back in November on another account. And back in November, it only got like 500 views or something. And I just happened to repost it this week because I needed something on the fly. And it went to 3,000 views and got 4 followers from it. And it's just, it's trial and error. And it's be willing to say like, okay, this was demonstrated successful in another situation, whether you mimicked another account or did a trend or something. Just because it didn't work for me today doesn't mean it's not going to work for me tomorrow. And maybe I can just tweak it. Maybe it was the background. Maybe it wasn't captivating enough that I was showing my coffee cup, or that my lighting was really bad. Sometimes that will just kill a piece of content because you got bad lighting. And just keep going, because even if it only hits 100 views, you're just going to bury it in more and better content moving forward. So I think people get a little bit too fixated on like, this is how it is right now, as opposed to thinking like, well, what's it going to look like in a month, in 6 months, in a year? Because you're building a portfolio, whether it's just for your own use or professional. And it improves over time. So focusing on the long game, having really specific goals that you can refer to and stay focused on, which is a challenge for me. I'm really bad with long-term goals. Something I'm constantly working on. But having that in your sights and reminding yourself, like, this is part of the process. This is part of the story that I'm going to share when I finally hit 10,000 views. And then when I finally hit 100,000 views, or, 50 conversions per day, or whatever it is that you're searching for. This is part of the story that you will eventually share, or you can and maybe should share along the way. Because people really love to see how someone began and be able to see how they progressed. And if you document that, it makes your story that much more powerful.
Yeah, no, I love that you're not letting it like bog you down, or at least you're not feeling too all consumed with like, oh, this didn't work or it did work. It's just strictly like, oh, okay, opportunity to learn from it and get better each time. So I'm glad to hear that. So to backtrack just a little bit in terms of telling your story and telling your progression, could we discuss a little bit of what your story is? I know on your Instagram you had a highlight that was dedicated, and it's pretty in depth, and it just says like my story, and it kind of goes through your like last 10, 15 years kind of iteration from like high school graduation forward. So I was wondering if you could share parts of that path from growing up and leaving home and figuring out to how you got to Panama. I know that's a lot to cover, but like,
yeah,
you hit on some key pieces that I thought was at least important, because those specific instances that you picked inside of the Instagram highlight served a very specific purpose for each moment that you evolved a little bit further and a little bit further. So if you give us a little bit more in depth of what that timeline actually looked like and what you were feeling in each of those moments.
Oh, the feelings. Yeah.
Yes, all of them.
All of the feelings. I'm not afraid of my feelings. No.
No, never. What? Therapy.
Yeah. So I graduated high school, and like I said, I do well in school. I'm a high achiever when it comes to academics. And that gave me a really sort of false sense of superiority, I want to say. Like, it definitely gave me a superiority complex, because then I did well in college. I went to the University of Virginia for a year and was super unhappy. Like, I had been working at a restaurant. I really loved it. I was working with people who were older and had traveled. It was an international restaurant. And I was like, why am I locked in Charlottesville? Because as your first year there, you're not allowed to have a car. You have to live on campus. It's like very controlled. And I just didn't like, I don't like football games. I don't drink. I don't like all of these things that you're not supposed to drink when you're 18 and you go to UVA, but they're still sending you to the frat parties. And I was just like, no. So I ended up dropping out, and that did not make my family happy. But I ended up working for Air France for a little over a year. And then I decided I wanted to go. I visited Paris for a couple of weeks, and I wanted to go and spend more time there and sort of find myself. And while I was working with Air France before that trip, I met some people from the Middle East that Well, first of all, Air France is a very multicultural organization. There were like 33 different countries represented there. So I was meeting people from everywhere, and the travelers, the passengers that we worked with, it just really lit a fire in me. Like I never felt that I was supposed to be in America. Every time I came back to the States, it would be like, oh, yay, I'm back to familiarity. And within 6 months to a year, I'm like, I need to get out again. Like I feel oppressed. I do not feel like I fit in with any of the normal culture considered normal in the US. And so I was just constantly trying to get out. And so when I met these people from the Middle East, it was the very first time they actually told me they were from Egypt because they were afraid to tell me that they were from Palestine. And they were afraid of what perception that I might have. I had actually never heard of Palestine at the time, which is really interesting. And to put this in perspective, half of my family is Jewish, like very, very Jewish. But I just, I like people, and they were really fun, and they, they're Muslim. They didn't drink. They like to go out and do different things. They wanted to go tubing or go play laser tag or whatever. And so I'm just like in my early 20s, just hanging out with people doing fun things.
Sure.
And when they finally told me like, oh, we're actually from Palestine, I was like, what is that? What does that mean? I started learning about the history, and I learned it from their perspective first, but it was through that and through experience in Paris, meeting other various Muslims from different countries, that I said, I need to learn more about this, because what I'm being told by the media and by my family is not the same thing, and I need to rectify whatever this disconnect is. So I went back to school after spending some time in Paris and just sort of figuring out like, all right, yeah, I do want to dedicate some time to school. And I studied global affairs, concentrating in Middle Eastern North African history, and specifically on the conflict in Israel, Palestine. I was at George Mason. It ended up being fantastic for that purpose. I studied Arabic. They had a flex program where I was able to design my own study abroad, or basically design my own summer thing and get credits for it.
That's very cool.
It was amazing. It was a really, George Mason is great for that. It doesn't have like the international clout that some universities do, but it does have connections, just based on the location. And so I did a trip that was organized by the school where we went for 2 weeks. And unfortunately, we had planned to meet with members of both Fatah and Hamas, and it inspired me to go back alone. And so I went back and I lived in a refugee camp, and I witnessed some pretty horrific things that the media doesn't talk about. And I also experienced some really beautiful things that the media definitely doesn't tell you about, because that's not the narrative that they're trying to create. Sure. And that really changed me. It really made me look at what I was being told and question. And it was really the first time it was like, well, this is literally what everyone says is happening, and I'm seeing the complete opposite, like with my own eyes. And let's see, after I graduated from college having this knowledge, and I knew I wanted to go back to the Middle East. I wanted to like really immerse myself in that culture. So I put myself through a teaching certification in Italy, just because why not go to Italy for that? And then my roommate ended up going straight over to the UAE and starting teaching. And I wasn't ready to do that, but she contacted me a year later and she's like, we need a grade 1 teacher. Please come over if you're interested. And so I moved to the Emirates. I lived in the southern part of Abu Dhabi for a year, had kind of some really wild experiences there. It's kind of like hillbilly land, but really, really rich hillbilly land in that particular part of the country.
Interesting. No, I never would have thought that. That's an interesting description.
It's just weird because everybody's driving Bentleys or like pink Cadillacs and things like that. But they're also that country is very interesting because it developed so rapidly because of foreign investment in the 70s. And so it went from literally nomadic tribes to almost overnight huge buildings. And it's with that did not come the education and the evolution of culture that some slower countries had. So you have families or perspectives that are oriented in a very, I don't want to say backwards way, but it's, for example, there's a lot of racism that I really didn't expect. And it's really within their own culture. Like they discriminate amongst themselves based on their own color, and they're all the same ethnicity, but it's like, oh, you're darker, that means you're lower. And that shocked me. And
Wow.
I was actually treated better there than anywhere else in the world. Like I remember I went to Ireland during one of my holidays there, and I was appalled by how men were approaching me, and they're just like they're drunk and sloppy and spilling drinks and all of this, whereas like that never ever happened in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, because it was like, oh, all right, there's a woman, she's definitely not from here, we better do this with respect. And it doesn't mean they actually fundamentally respect me, but it meant that they approached me in a really different way. So that I mean, everything wasn't perfectly rosy, and
Sure.
there are definitely some things that bothered me around there. But at that point in my life, I just wanted to travel and buy shoes. And I just, every week, multiple times a week, I was going to the mall, I was buying shoes, I was dressing up. I wanted to go to the shisha bars and sit and talk to people about their experiences. I learned about Hezbollah from a really interesting person from the south of Lebanon who told me what Hezbollah meant to them. It's not just the terrorist organization that you hear about. It's like, this is how they helped my family and my community. And it was a weird juxtaposition of like, I need to be this perfectly dressed, perfectly spoken person, but I also really want to hear the stories of like the grassroots, really what's hidden, the hidden stuff. Sure. And I found that I had the I guess the personality that people would open up to me. And I've frequently heard, like, I've never shared that with anybody, or I've definitely never told somebody from America this story or all of this. And that sort of fed my ego to an extent, but it was also, this is real. I can't deny this. Like I want to help people tell their stories. I want to help people feel comfortable declaring exactly what they experience and not be judged for it. And it was interesting that I was able to do that for other people, but by no means could do that for myself at this point. I was still in deep denial about, this is who I am, and I don't need to be wearing a whole lot of makeup and have 300 pairs of shoes and like define myself in that way. There's another way that I can define myself. So I came back to the US, thought I wanted to go to grad school, met you, who was going to Georgetown.
That's when we met, right? Yeah. Because I still have that email. We both, I was going to Georgetown at the time when I met Katie, and she had considered joining a similar program to mine. And I have the email of her going, actually, I went to my first class and the answer is no. But it was very poignant. That you decided not to go to Georgetown. So like you felt so bad in that email, but you were like, I needed to tell you, this is how I'm feeling, and this is why my decision has changed. And like, it was just very powerful because it was you being you. And like, when I reread that email, I can hear you saying it, the mid 20-year-olds of us being like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Me neither. But like, this is what I feel. Yeah. I'm sure I probably told you too. Like I moved there to go to Georgetown first because I couldn't find a job yet. So like I was like, well, I was told I need to get a master's to move forward in this industry. So this is what I'm going to do. And I did it, whether or not that was true, but like I did it. And, I'm still paying for it now, which is what it is. But I remember that I have that email from when you were like, I'm on the train right now and I'm going home, and this doesn't feel right anymore. And I don't think I'm going to keep going with it. And I'm so sorry. And I was like, don't feel sorry. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Like, why waste the time or the money if you're not ready or it's not the right fit? Right. That's the biggest thing. Like pushing on millennials to go to school when they were not didn't need to. So, so bad.
Yeah. Because like what I wanted to do was help people connect and tell stories. And I thought like, well, I just need to be fluent in Arabic and I should have this degree so that people pay attention to me. And oh, Georgetown has this clout and, you know, a pat on the back and all this stuff. Oh, you're going to Georgetown. And I was just like, this should make me happy. And it's not okay. It's not okay. And I'm going to graduate with $120,000, $150,000 in debt and then be forced to do something that's not going to work. It's not going to fulfill me. And it's not what I really want to do. So I didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. But I need to give credit where credit's due because I had just started dating my partner at the time when I was going through this Georgetown thing. And he is nothing if not 110% authentic, like all the time.
Always.
All the time.
Always.
And Amanda knows
No, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm glad that is exactly how he has stayed.
Yep. And it was just, you know, he'll understand things before most people do because he sees it in reality as opposed to everybody else who has their, you know, all these clouds of this is what it should be. It's just like, no, but maybe, but this is what it is. And so he saw me coming home stressed and I was still trying to work and I was still trying to do all the stuff. And I was like, I don't even like what I'm studying right now. And I'm doing double the hours that everybody else is. And what am I going to do at the end? He's like, do you want to do this? I'm like, of course I want to do this. I worked so hard to get here. And I don't think you really want to do this. And I don't think that was exactly how the conversation went, but that's how like I remember it and the feeling. And because he was really proud. He was very supportive, and then he just saw like what it did to me, and it was, I don't think this is right. So he has always been a very good mirror to the things that I am even not ready to accept, because it did take me a while, and there are definitely points throughout my personal development where he said it 8 years ago, and maybe I'm only hearing it and seeing it and ready to receive it now. It's like, oh yeah, like it's true. You saw it. And now I can see it too.
That's so sweet and so good that you found each other too, because finding a partner that's willing to show you the mirror in a loving way is so crucial. Because I'm sure you've dated other people that probably wanted to show you a mirror, but they're showing you like what they think you should be, or they're telling you like in a sarcastic way, like what's happening, or they're telling you it's critical, right?
Right.
And I don't think he's ever acted that way towards pretty much anybody he's ever met.
Yeah.
Honestly, I remember him being one of the best people to work with because he would always make you feel better. He could help you find the positive if there was ever a problem. And it was a good way to distract yourself because he would keep you in a place that's actually even keeled. And that was always so nice. And I think that's so great that you guys have continued to connect on that over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely count myself really lucky. I've had a couple of friends ask like, oh, how do you find a real person? And I was like, I know what would have worked better is if I knew myself and was my authentic self from the beginning. And that's generally the advice that I would give someone. But I got lucky. I was not my authentic self. He just saw it. And he was able to like call me out like, this is not you, this is not authentic. And I'm like, what do you mean? Of course it's me. I love my shoes. And while I do love my shoes, it's like, that's not who I am. That doesn't define me. And I just relied on it for so long because I was afraid of my darkness that the shoes helped to sort of cover up. And the darkness, I could get into that. But I think that's where a lot of people get stuck is they may be interested in developing, in moving forward in whatever way or finding themselves, but you can't find yourself unless you fully face your darkness. And it's not something that happens overnight too. So like you have to sit in that discomfort and face your flaws, and not just your flaws, but like the things that really, really need work, that really hold you back, and be compassionate with them. and give yourself permission to, hey, I know why you felt that way. And I know why you resisted it. And it's okay because now you have a choice. And it always comes back to choice. And people who say, like, oh, I can't do this, why can't you? There are very few situations in the world where you're actually stuck. And there, I would say almost none of them exist in, especially the Western, the global North. Because you can decide to change and you can change, and you might have to scrimp and save for a little bit to get you to where you want to go, but you can absolutely change. And if you're just stuck because you think you need to stay in this level of comfort, then you don't really want change. You don't really want something different. You're just frustrated that you're making a choice that you're not really committed to.
And that word stuck. No, it's just it's such a heavy word because you place so much pressure on it. And the part that sticks out to me the most when you say that is how true and scary that feeling is. But I felt so lost and so stuck for so long that it started making me like visibly upset. Like there's whatever, what's the word, chuggy or cringy things. Like I remember posting videos on my social when I was living in Philly of being like, I can't talk about what happened to me today, but I know I need to say something about what happened to me today. And like, I need to like almost like warn people, I guess. And that's the vibe I get from when I look back on those videos of myself. And I'm like, oh, she should have gotten out right then. She should have left right then, because clearly I'm upset enough to say this online and like make it vague because I can't actually talk about what I was doing or what was happening because, you know, NDAs and everything of what I had been working on. But like, I felt so stuck and I felt like I couldn't get out because I thought I was going to be such a disappointment if I left. Like I would have failed all of these people because I had told people for 15 years, this is my job. This is what I'm going to do. This is who I'm going to be. This is what this is it. This is what I'm good at.
Yep.
It's one thing. And when I decided I no longer, that for whatever reason, which, you know, previous episodes I've kind of talked about it, but still can't fully talk about, but like for whatever reasons, I was no longer fitting into that mold and I needed to find a way out and I didn't know how to get out. And the truth was I just had to walk out the door myself. Like I had to choose. I don't want to be stuck anymore. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I don't need to rely on somebody else to give me permission to leave. Like I leave. I leave if I want to leave. And that's the part that sticks with me still is like being stuck is actually a choice. It's not a permanent position. Feeling lost is only a feeling. Like it will fade as time moves on. But like choosing to do something about it, that's up to you. Like you don't want to feel that way anymore. You don't have to. So that's so tough. And getting yourself to that point to make that decision or to have that realization is hard. And you can't force somebody to figure that out. They have to figure that out on their own.
Yeah. And it takes a level of, I mean, you can call it desire or pain. But most people don't make snap decisions out of purely desire. It's usually out of pain, identifying with pain. And that's why when it comes to marketing, you're always leading with that. You're always leading with the pain point.
Yeah, you see that. Let me
because
pain point.
Because people are much more likely, instead of just showing this perfect life, which may or may not resonate or may or may not inspire someone to do something, that doesn't show that you've been where they are. And that's not relatable. So that could be, and I know there's lots of influencer accounts that are just like perfect photos and perfect house and whatever, but they're not, those are influencer accounts. They're not trying to sell you something. They're not trying to give you a life change. They're just trying to get brand deals basically. So I think a lot of people go about it in the way that I have to show that I'm put together in whatever way that looks. Or I have to show the progress after I've already made the progress, as opposed to like when I'm in it and like, oh my God, I just started a new account and I can't get any views. I can't get any followers. No one's responding to me. I can't talk about that because that just means I'm a failure, as opposed to like, no, you know what? This is where I am right now. I'm going over here. Watch me. And how do you do that? It's by being consistent. It's deciding that you're worth it. It's actually internalizing that. And there's lots of ways, from religions to, you know, some of the more new age stuff, to get you to that point. but it always involves choice. And that's always what I resisted. I was like, I wanted to be that leaf in the wind because I was comfortable with that role that I had, that, oh, I am a victim of my upbringing or my circumstances or my financial position or my medical conditions, or like whatever it is that you can fixate on to give yourself the excuse that, well, I don't really need to change. It's not me. If all this stuff went away, I'd be fine. It's like, no, because you can make adjustments, and it doesn't mean you're going to get rid of an incurable disease. It means that you're going to find a way to get to whatever your goal is in a realistic way, um, through your own energy. And I like to use the word energy because it doesn't necessarily mean you're working 40 hours. I was going to say 40 hours a day, but you know what I mean?
Right. Yes, 40 hours a week, right?
Or 80 hours a week or whatever it is, because most of the most inspiring success stories I've seen are when people just relaxed into, this is where I am, this is how it's going to work for me, and this is what I'm going to do. And when something needs adjusting, you make adjustments. If you need to admit that you're wrong, admit that you're wrong, which is another thing that I had struggled with. That's why I was stuck in place for so long, because I didn't want to admit that I am approaching this entirely the wrong way. I am looking at business entirely in the wrong way. I'm looking at money entirely in the wrong way, and it's limiting me. And you know, there's lots of ways you can find your way out of it. I'm a podcast person. I found people whose stories resonated with me in really random ways, and they helped me see things differently. And as I started to see things differently, I started to be willing to take different action that was previously really scary for me. But they had done it and they had seen whatever transformation. So why not me? And it's going to look different, but it was just validation. It's making yourself feel not alone. And with evidence, because the mind wants evidence to prove what it wants to accomplish. And if there is no evidence, it's really hard to stay fixated on that. So that's why you look for evidence. That's why you hire coaches. That's why you work with mentors, because they are the evidence that you need to convince your mind to get that specific brainwave you need to have success manifest in your life. And sometimes you can get that just through a podcast. So it's a really amazing medium.
Oh yeah. No, I love everything that you just said. Ditto. all of that. Yes. We love promoting podcasts. So if this episode is resonating with you and you loved it and you're feeling super energized by anything Katie is saying, please feel free to share it with a friend or a family member, someone you think that this could also resonate with. And we love spreading additional information and knowledge and help to other people all over the world. So please feel free to share. And you mentioned coaching. So you are intending to provide coaching in the future as you expand upon the Prism Seed Enterprises. But in the meantime, are you currently working with a mentor or a coach? And how is that process going? And what have you learned from it?
So first of all, I just don't market my coaching right now.
Okay.
I have occasionally somebody will reach out and like, I need help with this aspect of my branding or marketing, or like, I've seen how you change the way you think about things. Do you think you could help me do that? And that's really what I want to do. But there's still this fear in me that I'm going to put myself out and like, nobody's going to respond. So I'm being the projector. I'm letting the invitations come. Currently in this moment, I do not have a coach. I joined a mentorship for all of 2023, and it was actually based around harnessing feminine energy. And that's really what, you know, the imbalance that a lot of us feel could be attributed to overstimulation in the masculine sense, as in the masculine and the feminine are different and very complementary. You can't do one without the other. But a lot of women, if they are primarily motivated by feminine energy, a lot of women are put into this role where they need to behave in a masculine way, which is very hyper organized, like not just keeping your closet or your kitchen tidy, but like manage everything in terms of your schedule, your family, your job, your school, whatever it is, like has to be absolutely 100% controlled, as well as having a very defined trajectory. Whereas the feminine is very undefined. It's flow. It's leaning into what feels right now and trusting that. They both involve goals and focus, but the approach to achieving them is very different. And I have, I don't know if it's inherent in me. I haven't figured that out quite yet. But I currently possess and exhibit a lot of masculine energy to the point that my feminine is suppressed. And that's why I feel fear of chaos. That's actually my main inherent fear. It's not really fear of rejection. It's fear of chaos. It's unpredictability. And I worked through a lot of it last year, and I continue to work on it now. And that coach that I worked with, I'd worked with her briefly on and off in 2021, a little bit in 2022, in like memberships and a course that she did. But she is a really great example of someone who has told her story authentically from the very beginning, from marriage infidelity to building, a six-figure business in 6 months, to reconnecting in her marriage, to deciding to have another child, to experiencing infant loss. Like everything came through, and what she offered and what she talked about changed based on her story. But it was all personal experience. It was all very real. Even if you never experienced that, you could absolutely put yourself in her shoes. And she talks a lot about feminine energy. And I don't think it's definitely not the core of what I do and what I focus on. I'm definitely more, I work a lot with the victim mentality because that's me. That's where I put myself, and that's where I had to dig myself out of. So I work a lot with that, as well as changing your thoughts around yourself. Mm-hmm. And you have to become an observer, whether you do it through meditation or prayer or something else. You have to become an observer of your own thoughts to become even aware of where you're limiting yourself. And so, there's different techniques for that. And that's what I really love to do. I don't get to do that a whole lot with marketing coaching. Marketing coaching is more focused on money, which most people are more attracted to. So it takes a different person to decide, like, oh, you know what, if I change the way I think about myself and perceive myself in the world, it's absolutely going to impact my income, the opportunities I create for myself or find for myself. It all comes back to how you perceive yourself. A lot of people aren't ready to see that yet, though. So that's why I don't want to spend my energy to do that. I'd rather just tell my story. And if somebody's curious, then that's where it is. Yeah. But I do see in the future it's shifting to be, I don't know, I kind of want to tease this, but one of the things that I really want to do after my next birth is go more into not birth work. I don't want to attend births.
Sure.
But giving women the opportunity to see that they can have exactly the experience they want, whether it's a pain-free birth or, themselves as CEO of their own company or somebody else's company, because they're exactly 100% the same. They're just different situations that you desire. So it doesn't matter what you desire. You can literally create it for yourself. I grew up with probably a stereotypical perception of birth, and like, it's painful. It's the most painful thing you ever go through. It has to be this way, but it's worth it at the end. And it's just something you have to get through. it's really bloody, it's really scary, it's really all of these things. And I was fortunate enough to have a friend who had already, she doesn't even have children yet, but she told me about a podcast that told the alternative perspective, and I'd never heard it. And as soon as I heard the first story, I was like, okay, it's possible. That's what I'm going to do. And for the rest of my pregnancy, I was just like, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be 6 hours long. I'm not going to have like 2 days of labor. It's going to be 6 hours long. It's not going to be painful. I'm going to be empowered. I'm going to be confident. I'm not going to be afraid of anything. It led me to a book that reinforced that. It led me to different types of meditations that reminded me of that every day. And oh my God, that's exactly what I did. It's just like I designed it. And because I was so committed to that, that's what I got to experience. And so there's some, it's not fear. It's more like, I don't want to overpromise and then underdeliver to myself. And I do keep my birth a little bit on the private side because everybody has their own opinions.
Of course they do.
Well, just, it's more because everybody wants to weigh in their opinion. And as soon as you let other people's opinions in, you get derailed from whatever that is your goal. So I like to protect that space, but afterwards, like, I just want to show, like, no birth is ever the same. It is absolutely the most empowering thing that I've ever gone through. And I think these stories need to be told more because the fear around it prevents people from pursuing that type of autonomy. And the more autonomy we have in that way, I think the more free we'll become as a culture for raising children or whatever it is. But it's just another example that in general, the system has put in place to keep women oppressed, to like, this is how it's going to be, and this is you just have to accept it. No, we don't need to accept it. We can literally create what it is we want. We just have to become clear on what we want, and that's the challenging part.
Yeah, you gotta figure out what it is that you're excuse me, trying to manifest to begin with. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
No, and that takes some time and self-awareness and concerted effort to think through that. I think that's important for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the impact on telling your authentic story. So you move back to the U.S. You find a job working for working in real estate. We're fast forwarding just a little bit, going backwards, but fast forwarding slightly. You end up moving with your partner, and you're a realtor in North Carolina, and you start telling your authentic story as a realtor. And now you've do you still do real estate, or still certified, or no? When you moved to Panama, you kind of changed.
I'm still licensed. I maintain it for primarily for referral purposes, but I do have an investor client who occasionally will do a transaction, but it's more so he's developing his land now, so he likes me to be involved with that. He's not a native English speaker, so he likes me to be involved coordinating. But yeah, I didn't really start telling my story. It was actually in a business seminar that Keller Williams does. It's called Bold. Anybody who's a real estate person will know what Bold is. But that's where I got the idea, or it was during that course that I got the idea to do the 100 Days of Gratitude. It was basically just like, where can you be vulnerable? Where can you show a side of yourself that you usually hide? Again, not to make yourself uncomfortable, but just to tell something real. And then of course 2020 happened and and previously, like, my main lead generation source was door knocking. I much prefer door knocking to cold calling. But you show up at somebody's door during COVID and they freak out. So I stopped that. And it was in lockdown. We actually went to West Virginia because we just wanted to get out of like high density population. And so we're out there and everything's kind of on hold, like 2 transactions that I was in the middle of just like completely disappeared. So there goes money for that for that month.
Right.
Freaking out a little bit. But it was a really blessed time because I was able to not only find those podcasts with the certain people who were talking about authenticity and talking about how it is, ideal for marketing, not just being yourself, but like for building a business. But I also was like really meeting the crux of my own self-hatred and just discomfort with who I was. So, I mean, right in the middle of that, I could not have really been my authentic self because I was still hiding a lot of my own fears and from a lot of my own fears. But I reached a dark enough point, and instead of hiding from it for the first time, I decided to be accountable to it and apologize to myself, apologize to people that I had impacted because of that behavior, that chosen behavior. And then I also want to shout out Wim Hof, the Iceman, because my partner found an interview with him, and he like woke me up at 4 a.m. one morning, and I had found him. I found our new mentor. I was like, what are you talking about? And I watched this interview, or I think it was a Vice documentary about Wim Hof. And he just talked about how this really very simple breathing technique can improve your like alkalinity, heal from really random stuff. Like he got himself injected with E. coli, and then just by doing the breathing was able to not have any symptoms at all and completely avoid it. And he also taught, I think, 16 other people who had exactly the same results just from this breathing technique. And it turned it off.
That's how that originated.
Oh, it's very interesting. He has a really interesting story. But we turned it off and I immediately went into the other room and I'm like, I'm going to do this breathing now. And like the very first time I did it, I was like, oh my God, I can feel the circulation different in my fingers and toes. It was tingling. I could hear things better. And then it was just that because of that, the inherent trust, like I am making myself so much stronger and healthier just from these 3 minutes a day. And if I can do that for myself without any doctor intervention, what else can I do for myself? And that just like launched me off. I started researching. I started going into the unholy feminine, as in like what we've been brainwashed as women to believe, and understanding myself that way. Started reading some books. I read Joe Dispenza and experienced true money manifestation for the first time. Fun fact, actually coming to Panama was because of a Joe Dispenza meditation that I did. Not that he was leading, but I did it after reading one of his books. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to make this fact-finding trip work, because we'd never been here, so we were going to come down for 2 weeks. And I was like, to make this work feasibly, I need an extra $2,000 this month. I don't know how I'm going to get an extra $2,000 this month, but it makes you more open to opportunities. And so we decided to do DoorDash because we still had 2 vehicles at the time. And there was a thing like if you get somebody to sign up with you and they complete X number of dashes, then you get a little bonus and they get a little bonus. Well, we did that and we completed that, my partner and I. And then when they did the bonus deposits, for whatever reason, they doubled them.
Nice.
And suddenly it just like flew into my account. And the whole point of manifestation is like, you don't know exactly how it's going to happen. You just trust that it's going to happen in some way, and universe, God provides. And it's actually biblical, I've learned in the past year. So that was really cool. That was really cool to figure out. And so it just worked. And it was the birth. It was just this evidence, like very tangible, that this is actually how the universe works. Just most people don't know how to do it. So becoming authentic meant sharing what I was experiencing. It was like, hey, I just read this book and this is what I'm feeling. Hey, I just started this breath work and this is what it's doing for me. Maybe it can help you too. Because I was very much still in the process. I didn't have any final thing yet. But it was being able to share what I was doing and how it was helping. And it was, screenshots of the pages I was reading, and then some little commentary. And this is really hard for me to admit because blah, 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 blah. and giving your personal, you can, I encourage people to share other people's work because it doesn't divert them from you. People are following you for your story and your perspective.
Right.
You just have to give them that little bit of personal perspective. But I love resharing stuff because it also takes the pressure off. You don't have to create all the content in the world. You can just give commentary as long as you give credit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess, I mean, the question was again about what, being authentic, telling your,
Right. Yeah. Just that, how, as you started to tell your story in an authentic way, what was the impact that you saw? Like, how was it being received? And like, if you've noticed much of a difference, or if there's any kind of feedback that you necessarily got from implementing that plan.
Yeah. I mean, the impact was my business grew, and it was weird because I didn't talk about real estate anymore. I just talked about food and development and growth. And I would have people reach out to me and apologize. Hey, I'm not vegan, but we want to downsize. Can you help us buy a house? I'm just really interested in the food that you make. It's like, okay,
Totally.
it's
You don't have to be a vegan to be my client.
right. Exactly. I know it was so bizarre. It was so bizarre to me, but that can happen and will happen to anyone that you allow it to, because people just want to, your goal on social media, your goal on marketing is to build know, like, and trust. As you let people get to know you, the people, not everybody's going to like you, just let them go by. But I didn't have to do a single appointment or presentation when I shifted, because people already knew me. They might have a question like, can this work right now, or should I do this in 6 months or something like that? But I never had to show up and convince somebody that I'm valuable, because they already had their own perception of value of me. And so it made it so much easier. It takes so much pressure off, because then, I also could show up to showings in my hippie pants, and that's what was comfortable for me. And I didn't have to wear heels or whatever. I could just be me, and everyone was okay with that.
Right. Yeah. As long as you had the certifications to actually be the realtor for them, I don't think, what's it matter what you're wearing, right? I guess as long as you could legally help me buy this house.
Right.
Let's do
Right.
it.
Right. I mean, I know some people prefer other people who have a certain degree or have a certain style or have a certain whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
They're not my people. That's where the self-trust actually starts to come in. It's like, I know I'm going to reach the people that I'm meant to help. And you say that to yourself in the morning every single day. You say it to yourself in the mirror. You say it when you're driving. You say it when you're doing your laundry. It becomes truth, because it is true. And the more you put yourself out there as yourself, the more responses you're going to get like that. And I mean, I've obviously pivoted multiple times since then, but now the best feedback I can get is I got a random message on WhatsApp from a friend who I worked with years ago. And she was just like, I just wanted to let you know, like, I've been going through a hard time, but I've been watching what you do for years, and it just gives me hope. It just lets me know that this is not forever, that anything is temporary, like all of these things. And it was, unsolicited. It's not business oriented, but it's, when you share yourself, when you share your story, you give other people the opportunity to connect with themselves. And that makes lasting impressions. And it's, whether doesn't matter what kind of business I decide to launch, or if I completely go out of business, this doesn't matter. It's about connections. It's about bringing people to a point of feeling safe to express themselves, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love that you've been able to build that kind of community for yourself and for the people that follow you or engage with you in your business. That's very crucial to have a safe space, especially on the internet these days. It is the actual Wild West now. So I'm curious, since you've had such a positive impact so far, or you've at least received, for the majority, positive feedback based on your experience there, how do you define success, and what does that look like to you? Like, because you've mentioned in the past as well that your life mission has changed over time. So I'm curious, like, how do you define success, and what does that look like?
Success as a broad concept, I would define as fulfilling your own personal goals while also satisfying your needs. And some people have very specific financial goals or lifestyle goals or family. It doesn't really matter, because if you don't know your goals, then you'll never be able to define success. You'll always be defining it by somebody else's metric. So it has to be personal, and you have to get to know it yourself. What that looks like for me, I have different goals or different things that define success for me on all of those categories that I mentioned. I feel like I would not say I've reached financial success from my own terms. I would be much more comfortable with a different level of income that I'm working on, and I have different avenues that I'm pursuing for it. And at the same time, my needs are met. Especially, like, I have an emotional need to be experiencing things that are unusual. And so just living in a different country that is extraordinarily challenging in some really ridiculous ways, being, a global South country.
For sure.
That, even though it's frustrating, it's always somewhat satisfying to me, because I would rather be frustrated living something very different than living somewhere that I know in more material comfort, but still having to deal with the BS that I don't tolerate well from the US or wherever. So that to me is definitely successful. I feel, I don't want to jinx anything, man. I'm so afraid of jinxing, but I feel really successful in my motherhood journey so far, mostly because I have been able to filter out other people's expectations and remain really true to what feels right for me. And that has a lot to do with, like, how we design this life. Like, we're not close to family members that want to weigh in all hours of the day. They can't just drop by and say, oh, right, well, you should be letting them sleep at this time. It's like, well, that actually doesn't work for us and doesn't work for our family. And so we're able to navigate that in a bubble more than having all of these influences. And that is successful to me, because I don't want to put myself in another situation where I'm letting someone else dictate, as opposed to searching inside and finding it for myself and then executing. And if I find that I need to change something, I can choose to ask for help. But if I don't feel the need for that, I like to be able to learn myself first. So I guess that's how someone can define it for themselves. And I'm open to the possibility that it will change, and that I might have a season of life where I'm much more financially successful and really struggling as a mom. I have no idea what having 2 kids is going to feel like, because I'm already feeling guilty.
Sure.
You're not even here yet. And I'm like, how I want to give all of my extra minutes to my daughter right now. And I'm going to have to divide that with another child, another whole human. And
right,
that's my biggest fear around this next birth, is, will I be able to balance that? And I know somehow that I will, because I know things will balance and I'll go based on feel, and we'll try and fail and move forward.
Yeah.
But I have to let myself be open to, hey, you know what? I don't know what's happening in the future. We might have to go back to the US at some point, or we might choose to, for whatever reason, to fulfill another goal.
Sure.
And that's not what I would choose right now, but that's okay. And that could be another temporary situation. So I'm trying to be less rigid.
I like that. And I also appreciate the fact that you said that you could leave success open. Right now, success looks like this, but maybe in another few months it could morph into something different, because I will be in a different situation in those in the future. So it should evolve with you as you are evolving at the same time. I love that. What would you say has been your greatest achievement?
Birth.
pre-birth. Yeah, no,
childbirth. Sure.
that's straight badassery right there. I've completely defied a lot of odds, and it takes a lot of bravery, and again, just self-awareness and trust in you and in your body. And like, we don't give women that kind of body autonomy, freedom when that moment happens, in the States. You're told very much so you have to do a very specific, like, you got to get this many appointments done, you got to get this many checks done, it's got to be at the hospital, you have to basically be laying on your back, which is like the worst way to do it.
Right? It's like, why? It makes no physiological
sense. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm nowhere close, so I really can't comment on motherhood or birth at all, so I won't any further, right? But like, I've heard plenty of scary stories and plenty of success stories from my friends that have gone through that experience, and it's a lot. It seems overwhelming. So I think your fears for your second child are still valid fears, even though I know you're going to be a great mom and you will find a way and you absolutely will love both kids, but it's still okay that you feel that way, that you worry about splitting your heart in half again, right? There's a piece of you that stays with Kaya, and there's a piece of you that's going to go to the new baby, and it's hard. It's hard to reconcile right now, but you got this, man. You did it the first time. You have evidence. You have proof that you know how. You have proof that you can do it again. So like, I believe in you. And then ditto to your partner. Whatever he said. Just repeat that in your head during the meditation. Yeah.
No, but it was, I guess, the other thing I would say about success is I would say ultimate success, regardless of where you are in your goals, is knowing yourself, because that's always, like, yourself is always going to change, but as long as you're in tune with it, like, you can adapt with it. But that's also what contributed to my greatest achievement, which was birth. And it was acknowledging these are my fears around it, and then figuring out ways to reconcile it and not be fearful. Anybody who happens to listen to this who's going to have kids, the one book I recommend to everyone is called Childbirth Without Fear. And it's very old, very British, like old British doctor from like the 19-teens, 1920s. Very wordy, but if you can get through the wordiness of it, he describes physiological births. He describes like the mindset around it. And he's very, even as a man, he acknowledges like, hey, I'm just a man, but this is what I've observed in attending hundreds of births. Sure. You can have it this way, and you can decide. And making a decision means acknowledging all possible outcomes, and that's where knowing yourself comes into play. And the fear is what gets in the way of everything, whether it's childbirth or starting a business or finding a partner or just like living your life. Fear is what holds you back. So the more you can learn to eliminate that in various ways, that's what's going to set you free, basically.
Oh, I love that. So what would you say are your current goals for 2024? Is there something specific you're trying to achieve?
Other than another blissful birth? That's really my main focus, because it's going to lead to the next steps for me. Like, I'm still, like I said, I'm making some products that have been requested in different ways. Like, well, how do you if you're working full time and you're also a mom and you're like growing food and all this, how are you, like, you must spend all your time in the kitchen. Well, no, I don't. I actually spend very little time in the kitchen, I think. And I'm also using like 95 to 98% whole foods. And this is how I do it. This is our shopping list. We can only go shopping like once every week, maybe 2 weeks, because the grocery store is an hour and a half away. So we have to plan, we have to be intentional. And this is how we do it. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to the table. And then following the birth, I would like to get on more podcasts, honestly, to tell the birth stories, to tell like how you can shift your mindset around it, because I think it's really, really powerful for just like the feminine energy everywhere.
Yeah.
To know that like there are other options. So I would like to share that story more. And it might come with its own digital products or courses, or maybe just like a seminar or something. But I just want to be reaching more people on different ways of living your life. It's not really a finite goal at this point. Just
And that's okay. Yeah. Those are great things to be thinking about too. So if you could give advice for people who are feeling lost in their current life or their certain situation and they need to make a change, but they don't really know how, what advice would you give those people?
I would say do whatever you need to do to get more clarity on what you do want. Because usually when you're lost or you feel held back, like you're really focused on, well, I don't want this. Like, this sucks. This is horrible. I feel so trapped. Okay, well, what would it look like if I weren't trapped? What would it look like if I didn't feel this way? Because just asking, giving yourself permission to ask those questions and then answer them can be extremely liberating. Sometimes that's all you need to get yourself going in the right direction. But once you have some sort of direction, even if it's just, all right, I need to get more clarity on how to move out of my parents' house or buy a house or start a business. Well, then you start looking for people who've done it before. And whoever it is that you connect with, some people connect really well with Tony Robbins. I do not, because he is so fantastically successful. There's too much of a disconnect with me. So I usually listen to his podcast when he's interviewed someone that is closer to where I am at personally. But find those mentors, whether you get to do one-on-one with them or just, consume their content. And if that's through podcasts or YouTube videos or their social media or getting on their newsletter because you like to read or looking for blogs, because you're not going to be blessed with change unless you actually take action. And action is not complaining, and it's not lamenting how you feel or how long you felt it or how long you might still feel it. That's not action, and that actually keeps you locked in place. But giving yourself the opportunity to conceive of something different and then finding other people that had that same belief and actually made something happen, that's the best way to start. And you can decide from there, like what levels of support you need, because I don't recommend doing it all alone, which is what I did for several years. You always move faster if you have somebody there that's done it before or can at least be a sounding board. I cannot speak to therapy. I've never done therapy, but I do, when I've heard it compared to coaching and as I've experienced coaching, therapy is like figuring out why you might feel this way and just focusing on that. But coaching is very much more action and future oriented. And when I want to change something, I want to be future oriented. And I want to, I like to check things off a list. I like to actually do something. Well, how am I going to, if it's just, I need to feel better about myself. Well, how am I going to do that? All right, well, I'm going to treat myself with respect, which means eating holistically and giving myself movement and doing regular mindset exercises or giving myself decompression time, breath work. I have all my personal list of things that make me feel like I respect myself, because if I don't respect myself, there's no way the rest of the world is going to. There's no way the universe is going to serve stuff up to you on a silver platter if you don't believe you deserve it. So figure out that you deserve it and then decide where you want to go.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Katie, I have definitely taken up enough of your time. So please tell everybody how they can find you, where they can, engage with your content, or if they wanted to work with you through the Prism Seed Enterprises. What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Sure. Thank you. Well, Instagram is what I love. It helps me express myself.
Sure.
I'm at on Instagram at prism.seed, prism.seed. I have other accounts, but that's where I talk about my regular stuff right now. The marketing company that I have is Prism Seed Social, and that's just prismseedsocial.com. If you are specifically looking for content creation or marketing consultations, things of that nature. And I'm on all the socials. you could, whichever one suits your fancy, but Prism Seed on Instagram is where I am most frequently.
Gotcha. Wonderful. Well, Katie, thank you. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on the show. This has been so fun, and it's always the best time reconnecting with you and learning about what you're working on and hearing about your growth and your story. I don't think maybe you should write a book one day because I feel like you've had just a fascinating evolution. I don't know. I have dreams about figuring out a way to convert the podcast into a book at some point, but I don't know how I'm going to make that come to fruition yet. But I always love reconnecting with you, and I really appreciate you coming on and being so open and vulnerable and sharing parts of your story with my listeners. And it just means the world to me. And I wish you nothing but the best. And I hope you continue to grow and you do get a wonderful birthing experience for yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I love to talk about this stuff. You can probably tell. But yeah, it was really fun. So thank you so much.
Of course. No, I will definitely have you on again. I'd love to deep dive again with you on a different topic, like the human design stuff, or when you do feel you're in a good place. Yeah, we could do a human design one, or when you are in a better place after the second birth, if you would like to come on and talk about the free birthing experience, that could be an option as well. So, of course, when your schedule fits. Yeah, obviously, I know you got a lot going on, but it was an absolute pleasure having you here. So I appreciate it so much. So, all right, everybody, that's going to be it for our episode today. You can find me at askwhatnowpodcast@gmail.com. Send any questions, things you'd like to connect with. I'm also on Instagram at Podcast for the Lost and amanda.k.powers. We are also on TikTok, Podcast for the Lost, and all discount codes are linked in the show notes, and I will make sure all of Katie's information is also linked in the show notes so you can keep up with her there. And remember, wanderers are always welcome.